Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights, and tips to help you with your business challenges. If there's a topic you'd like covered, or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie, and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. My guest today is a former nurse and midwife, a business owner since 2011, and an executive coach since 2016. Her specialist skills and interests are leadership, resilience, and physiological safety in the workplace. And her TEDx talk titled, "I Dropped My Keys and Someone Nearly Died," was the second most watched in the world in September 2021. My goodness me, that's some achievement. I'm delighted to introduce Lisa Nolan to the You and Your Business studio. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Alec. Thanks for having me.
My goodness, there's a lot to talk about there, but we'll get to that in a minute. I will, as you know, take you back to your last year in school. And were you the nerd? Were you the vagabond? Were you the traveler? Which one were you?
I was the good girl. I always did what I was
Oh,
told.
good.
So I gave my teachers and my parents no trouble whatsoever. I sometimes say that to my mother. I owe you some trouble. Um, and I found it hard to study actually. I wasn't gifted at holding on to information, but luckily I was in a class of high achievers and they
Right.
inspired me. So when they would talk about how they studied or the amount that they had studied or what they had studied, I would be inspired by that, and trying to keep up with them was really good for me actually, because it got me through the Leaving Cert actually.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, all boats rise in the tide, is that it
Yes,
sort of thing?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So, had you a calling of any sort, or had you a plan moving forward?
Absolutely, I did. I had known that I wanted to be a nurse since I was about 8 years old.
Right.
Um, and I had known it in a deep way that it was never a question. I never even questioned it or never looked at anything else really. And actually, that made my schooling very easy. It made it easy to choose my subjects. I knew that the path wasn't through college because there wasn't a college course at that time. You went in the olden days when I did my nurse training. You went to the hospitals directly and
Right.
trained there. So I trained on the job. I was working full time and training on the job. So that was absolutely my calling. I could not wait to get into it. I did my Leaving Cert when I was 16 years old,
Oh, wow.
turned 17 in the summer, and the next month had started as a nurse's aide. I just couldn't wait to get into it.
That's amazing. I suppose, give us an insight because, the rest of us in society are in awe of those who find that sort of calling at an early age.
Mm.
Can you attribute it to anything, or where did that sort of influence come, or is it just innate?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the answer is really that I have always been a very intuitive person and could really feel, and I still can, I have to manage it now better, really feel when somebody else was in pain or needed help, and just compelled to run in and help and do what I could. And and I yeah, it was an innate calling. Yeah, there was
Oh,
no rhyme
wow.
or reason to it really. It was a
Wow.
feeling.
That's fantastic. Yeah,
Mm.
I think so many of us could do with that as we wander through life. But in terms of working, I think you went to work with Beaumont Hospital, and then as part of that, you had rotation in the various areas of nursing.
That's right. Yeah, I trained as a general nurse in Beaumont. We were the first group to go through from scratch with Beaumont when Beaumont opened.
Right.
It was a fantastic hospital, brand new, well staffed, really well run. And yeah, we did our rotations around. And the rotation that really grabbed me was the one that I did in the Rotunda in midwifery. Funny story, when I was in the lift, I ended
Right.
up in the lift with the consultant who had delivered me, and I knew him because he had a very unusual name. So I told him. He wasn't really that impressed. But anyway, it was a good moment in that. But I really, really loved it. And that was my calling. So I knew that I had to finish my general nursing. I was going to anyway. But at the time, the system was that you did your general nursing first and then you did your postgrad in midwifery. So that was the plan from that day, from that time that I was in the Rotunda.
All right. And what aspect do you think sort of drew you towards midwifery?
Um, I I think just actually to be present at the birth of a baby is pure joy. That is life right there. It's pure joy for everybody when things go right, and hopefully they normally do. Sometimes they don't, and when they don't, that's when you're really, really needed as well. So I was there. Midwives often work overtime because they don't want to leave the person that they've been looking after if there's a birth imminent, or
Sure.
and that's fine. So it's not a sort of clock in, clock out situation, even though it kind of has to be for some reason, for lots of reasons.
Yes.
But yeah, the whole thing of bringing life into the world, and see, it's just magic. It's just magic. Every single time was magic. What a lovely way to make a living.
Yes, a fantastic.
Mm.
I'm nearly envying you already with that. So you were to spend a number of years in that sort of position.
Yeah, well, I qualified in Beaumont in 1991. That was the year, for those who remember, of the first Gulf War, and all the
Right.
nurses were being repatriated back from Baghdad at that time, and they were coming back with mountains of ICU courses and loads of postgrad courses. They were really highly skilled, highly qualified nurses just flooding back into Ireland, and basically all the staff nursing jobs were being taken and hoovered up. So when we qualified, there wasn't much available for us.
All right.
So instead, I went, I could have drifted around doing bank and shift work,
Yes.
and agency work, but my colleague and my friend of mine and myself, we went to Calcutta. We worked in Calcutta. We volunteered for 3 weeks initially. I stayed for another 5, so 8 in total.
Wow.
And we worked in a street clinic in Calcutta, set up every day under tarpaulins and taken down every night. Uh, with people who were homeless, who had very advanced TB, very advanced leprosy, very malnourished, really impoverished,
Wow.
really at the coal face of where. And the reason we went there was that the professor of tropical medicine, who we had gone to ask where can we go in the world, we were thinking Africa.
All
He said,
right.
don't go to Africa, because if you go to Africa, you will be basically in a similar system. There'll be systems of hospitals, doctors, medicines, all the rest of it. Go somewhere where you don't have any of that and you have to use your head. And he said,
Wow.
I've just the place for you. It's Calcutta. And he was right. Out on the street, treating people on the street, using our head. So that was an amazing experience.
I'd say it was, but it certainly gets you thinking in different ways because, I mean, you didn't have access to maybe all of the medicines and certainly not the facilities
Mm.
that you would have had. How did you sort of cope with that, both mentally and physically with it?
Mentally was easy enough for me because this was where I wanted to be, where people had a need and I could feel it and I could help, and that was it. There was no question about it. It's interesting you asked physically, because actually I really became malnourished myself. We had, living in a hostel, and I say that word loosely. It was very poor living conditions. Uh, I don't really like Indian food. I hadn't really thought that
Oh,
through. And not the best quality food in any stretch of the imagination. So actually, and I didn't have a mirror, I didn't have anything to tell. But actually, when I came home, I was 7 stone and I'm 5'7". So I was very undernourished and very underweight. And actually starting to become ill. So that's one of the reasons that I came home. So actually physically, and I was only 20 when I went. I had my 21st birthday party out in Calcutta. I mean,
wow.
amazing experience for lots of reasons, but I didn't know how I was allowing myself to get so run down at the time. So probably not coping with this physically as well as I could have.
Mm. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my studio guest today is Lisa Nolan. Wow, we were just talking about your experience in Calcutta, which at the best of times is a tough place to live.
Mm.
Um, and also you're talking about the physical experience and how it impacted on your life. I suppose that was a wake up call for you as well, going forward for the future.
Yes, you would think it would have been, but it kind of wasn't. I didn't get the wake up call until much later in terms of burning out. I burned out basically of nursing midwifery. So I came back from Calcutta.
Yeah.
I went then to work in a very exclusive private hospital in London, which was the opposite of the street clinic in Calcutta, really the opposite in every way. And then I went to train as a midwife because that was always in my head. And I had planned actually to go back to the developing world with that skill.
All right.
And we got towards the end of my midwifery postgrad training, and the week that I was doing my finals, I was a bit sleep deprived because I was on call both for work. I was on call for my best friend was actually in labour at the time as well, and also I was working in the neonatal intensive care unit, and we had switched off the ventilator on a 6-day-old baby.
Wow.
One of those days, and everything that week. I always say to my clients now, don't make big decisions when you're tired. It's not the
Sure.
time. And now I know, basically I was burning out. I know now why I burned out of nursing and midwifery is because I really wasn't looking after myself. I didn't get that wake up call. I don't know why in Calcutta. I just carried on. You're young, you're invincible. You just carry on. You keep going. But that was a huge implosion on my life, basically realizing that actually I was burnt out and I couldn't be a midwife for the rest of my life, which was what I'd wanted to be, a nurse and midwife since I was 8 years old, and I was really kind of lost. Um,
Right.
I left. I went back into nursing later on and burned out again. Now, if I'd known then what I know now, I would not have burned out. And that's a lot of my work now is to try and get people to recognize that they're burning out and address it based on my experience because I can see how quickly it can happen.
I suppose if we look at the first sort of stages in working in Calcutta, you were so immersed in the job and so enthusiastic
Mm,
for it that all other considerations kind of get thrown out. I suppose a
yeah,
bit like business owners who
yeah.
suddenly find themselves, and of course you're working with those these days, and
Mm.
so if you don't get the physical, you're likely to get the mental or both if you're unfortunate enough.
Yes, absolutely. And I can see it. Yes, you're right. I can see it happening. You can see where somebody is, your business is your baby. If you set up a business, it is your
Mm.
baby, it's your family. And there's no such thing as 9 to 5 when you're a business owner. But the problem is that the adrenaline keeps you going, the fight, the drive, the motivation. But ultimately, we are all humans. We have a physiology that needs to be managed and minded. You need to rest. We all need to rest. We all need to watch our mental health.
Yes.
It's really, really important, and I talk about that a lot in terms of self care for busy business owners, who seem to be afraid to let go. They just keep going.
Yes. Well, again, in a lot of cases, so many of them were young and
Yeah.
enthusiastic and invincible.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of
Exactly.
those things. So
Mm.
anyway, you decided to come back to Ireland.
Mm.
Um, so what were your plans then?
Well, really, I was living in London, living the life in London. I mean, London was, when you're in your early 20s, London's the place to be.
Yeah.
And I think the friends that I had very a lovely set of friends, but they were all starting to disperse around the country. We'd qualified. They were all starting to get married and settle down. And the life, it just wasn't quite as much fun as it had been in the beginning. And I burned out and got homesick, got really homesick.
Ah,
So I came home. I couldn't practice midwifery when I came home because I hadn't stayed long enough in London after I had qualified. But
right.
I was burned out of it anyway. I thought I couldn't do it. During my midwifery training, somebody had mentioned to us at one point that 1 in 3 midwives ends up in court at some point during
Wow.
their career to answer for something. And that can be at any time up to the baby is 21 years old. So it could be any time.
My goodness.
And I think that was the start of what I work on now is a lot around the psychological safety. That was really the start of the litigious nature of society and particularly in healthcare, but society is kind of feeding it. It comes from
Yes.
all levels. And that was maybe the first insight I had into that. And I thought, I don't want to dread going into work. Don't want to dread coming home thinking, what have I missed or what have I not done? Because you go in with your full heart and soul to do the best you can, to work
Yes.
through your lunch break and never go to the bathroom for 13 hours because you just want to be there for your patients. You're really pushing yourself physically and mentally to do your best. And if that's not good enough and you're going to end up in court at some point explaining something that happened 10, 20 years ago, I just thought I could see I had a vision of my life just being full of stress. And I thought, I don't know if I can handle this.
I think that's an interesting perception because if we sort of drop back to the beginning and sort of from the age of 8, you had this innate calling to be a nurse, and to suddenly to have all the experience you've had, you now find yourself at a crossroads that this you're going to have to give up something and find
Yeah.
a new path.
Yes.
That's an interesting challenge.
It was, and the challenge for me was and has always been, and I've only just found it in coaching, is how can I still be me, still, make a difference in people's lives, help them through a difficult situation, and yet maintain my own energy. So for that reason, coaching has been just the best career path for me in the last 6, 7 years, because it allows me the contact with people that I love. It allows me to be there in the moments when they have something stressful happening or some challenge. And yet, because of the nature of coaching, because of the nature of our supervision and the way that we
Sure.
manage ourselves and our practice, I can look after myself. And also, I'm practicing what I preach. I really am. I know now how to avoid burnout, how to prevent it, how to spot it coming. I can see a mile off when I'm starting to get too tired and when something needs some attention.
Right. I suppose there was a transition before the coaching because you kind of came back as a PA initially just to try and find your feet again. And tell us about that because you were sort of one of the first virtual PAs in the country.
That's right. I think it was. Yes, yeah, because I had left nursing and I went to qualify as a medical secretary,
Right.
because I thought that was a way of using my skills and still having contact with people. And yet, when you're a medical secretary, you're not going to be causing anyone to, or by lack of what you do, nobody's going to come to harm. So I thought that was, and also the hours were much more family friendly. So I thought that was the solution, and it was a lovely solution for a
Yeah.
time. Then when my children were born, I needed to work from home, so I transitioned to home. I'm fairly sure I was one of the first virtual assistants, still with
Right.
the dial-up tone and that horrible sound. That was what I was working with at the time.
My goodness.
And so I was working for a nurses group first of all, and then that role kind of grew with my children, which was great. As they got bigger and more independent, they needed me for more hours, and that was great. I could do it from home. And then the recession came and hit our family, as it hit many families. So I set up my own business on the side
Yes.
to earn some extra money as an independent virtual assistant. And then a few years later, one of my clients was a coach. And one
All
day
right.
she said to me, "You're already helping me so much with the design of programs and your input into it because of your background and your knowledge of stress management and resilience and all the rest of it. Would you ever think about training as a coach?" And I thought, wow, I would love it. I thought about it, and she's fantastic. She mentored me through that program because she's a very experienced coach. We still work
Right.
together, um, and yeah, so I've been a coach for 6, 7 years now.
Fantastic. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my studio guest today is Lisa Nolan. That's fantastic. So we've now found a new career path for you. Um, you're bringing a lot of skills in terms of, okay, you understand physical burnout, you understand mental burnout, and you're starting to see it around, and you're coaching. Tell me how you help people.
So I help people through coaching in its purest form is my favorite thing to do. So that is where you coach the person in front of you that day with what they bring. So I know that a lot of coaches, and I do it too, we have to sort of assign ourselves to a niche. It's executive coaching or it's life coaching or career coaching.
Yes.
In fact, coaching in its purest form deals with whatever is brought to you. So I can handle whatever anybody brings. And of course, everybody is a whole holistic human that has lots going on. So even when you're doing executive coaching, there is an element of personal and resilience and stress management. Uh, so I help people through the coaching process to find their best answer for them. It's not my answer for them, it's
Yes.
their answer for them. And to do that, I have to establish, first of all, a container of safety for them, a safe space, that they know that is confidential, that they can trust
Yes.
me. I approach it with, there's a quote from, it's Carl Rogers' approach, unconditional positive regard for the client.
Okay.
In actual fact, I love that. And I could resonate with it because it's what I did as a nurse. Unconditional positive regard for the patient, no matter what they have done or what you think they've done or what has happened to them. They
Sure.
deserve the best care no matter what. And you're the person to do that without any judgment, so I already was skilled at that and good at that as part of me as a person anyway. But I
Sure.
bring that to coaching, is no matter what somebody brings, there is absolutely no judgment. We're a partnership in it. We collaborate on how to find their best answer. So it's quite a
Yeah.
skill to be present for somebody and facilitate them to their answer, not my answer, that I don't that they don't have any transference of emotions for me or transference of
Right.
my preconceived ideas, all of that. So I leave all that behind. So people leave coaching sessions generally feeling lighter, happy, because they've been speaking to somebody who's listened to them, properly. We don't tend to listen to each other in real life. We ask a quick question: how are you? Fine. Move
Yeah.
on.
Of course. Yeah.
And yet talking is one of the things that has separated us from other species. We're the higher evolved species. We need it. It's where we get it's talking things through is where we can access some of the deepest parts of our brain. Even thinking it through isn't the same. So it's a real gift to give people to the purity of your attention, to listen and be on their side, and yet challenge them enough that they will make progress.
So I presume, or may I not, that you get involved in also their personal lives and a lot of the stresses and strains that come from that.
Yes, well, if a person is a holistic being, so there's lots
Yeah.
going on there. It's not just that they're a business owner or an executive or a manager or, a mother
Yeah.
or a dad or whatever it is. So when they bring up something in their personal life, that's absolutely fine. I'm not a counselor. I'm very clear,
Yes,
when
of course.
counseling is needed. But that doesn't mean they can't bring up something that has happened in the past that affected them. We talk about it, and then coaching is very future focused. So we go, okay, how can we take that? Where do you want to be in the future? And let's use that. Or how do we move forward? So whatever people bring is fine. And it's funny because sometimes they'll say, oh yes, next time I want to talk about my time management and how do I manage this person on
Right.
my team that I find hard to lead. And I will make a little small note of that, and say this is what you wanted to talk about. And yet 5 minutes later they've brought up what's really on their mind,
Ah,
which is
right.
something from their own life or how. But of course it all impacts everything that they're doing, so of
Yes.
course we can deal with that. If that's the thing that's foremost in their mind, that's what we deal with in the moment. It's a dance. It's a
Yeah.
dance between the client and the coach.
You were inspired to write a talk for TEDx. Tell us a
Yeah.
bit about that, the title, what it meant to you, and why to do it.
Sure. So in 2019, I was asked to do a couple of seminars at a healthcare leaders conference in Belfast.
Right.
And I did the seminars, but the great thing was I got to sit and listen to the other speakers as well once my seminars were finished. And the keynote speaker was an amazing lady called Amanda Oates. She works in Merseycare NHS Healthcare Trust, and she was talking about psychological safety and how the impact of somebody being disciplined for a human error, the huge impact of it on not just them but everybody around them, and also the service, the healthcare service. And she spoke about this new approach called just culture, which is where you approach humans as humans and
Right.
deal with human errors as human errors. And while I was listening to her, there was a memory that I had buried from my own nursing past, which was where I had been involved in an unexpected medication event. So a patient had received a double dose of insulin.
Right.
Um, Technically, none of us did anything wrong, and yet he received this extra dose.
Yeah.
So she was speaking about this, and I had buried this memory from 20 years before. So I went to explore to see, was this still an issue? That I had buried my incident. We hadn't reported it.
Yes.
He was fine, thankfully. But I went to explore, was this still an issue? And no matter who I spoke to around the world in healthcare, they all said, yes, this is an issue. We're afraid to speak up if we've made a mistake. We can't speak up. So I was inspired to write the TED talk about my own experience and about the impact of it, and the impact of what happens if, as a leader, you don't allow your people to feel free to say, I've made a mistake or I've had a near miss.
Yes.
It just makes no sense to belittle them, put them out on unpaid leave. The social and financial impact of that is absolutely enormous. And unfortunately, we're still living in a situation where in a lot of sectors, there's the copy and paste management style from old
Yes.
of,
Yes, of course.
you did this, I'm going to give out to you in front of everybody and put you out on unpaid leave. And let's find the bad apple and punish the apple, and then everything will be okay. And that is not the answer. for lots of reasons. So the title of the talk sounds a bit clickbaity, but it actually is the truth. I dropped my keys and someone nearly died. So, dropping your keys is something we all do. It's something that happens to us. We don't intend for it to happen. We don't get up in the morning and think I'm going to harm somebody today, or I'm going to
No,
drop
of
my
course
keys today, but it happens. And actually through me metaphorically dropping my keys, somebody did nearly die, and we covered it up.
Right. I suppose in the sort of 2 minutes we've left, believe it or
Yes.
not, that's how quick this goes. What now for Lisa Nolan? What's the future hold for you?
Um, what I am focusing now more on since the TED Talk is the area of psychological safety in the workplace, because I believe in it so passionately, because I've had such a deep experience myself, and because I want to make workplaces much happier places for people to be in. And I also um, my tagline for my business is, as you can see behind me, be the leader people can't wait to work for. So
Yeah.
that's where my focus is, to help people become the leader that people can't wait to work for.
Great. And tell us, where can people find out more about you?
So my website is aslancoaching.ie. And I am all over the internet. So if you Google me as Lisa
Over
Nolan
the
or Aslan
internet.
Coaching, you will find me. My TED Talk, I would love if you watch my TED Talk, because then you'll get a sense of what happened to me and my purpose is and my mission. Yeah.
I suppose in the minute that we've got
Yeah.
left, have you any advice for our listeners, just on a very, very basic level to consider?
Sure. I would always say to leaders that your people are your best asset. I know they might hear this sometimes, but really take it on board. It doesn't appear in your financial statement. Your assets are your
Yes, of
equipment and
course.
your buildings, but your people are your best asset. And here's the thing, even the people that you find it difficult to lead, even the people who push back on you, they are your asset. So if you work on that, they will be your asset going forward, and they'll become a better asset.
Wow.